Welcome back to the Pangolin Photo Safaris channel. I'm Sabine and today's video is about light metering modes. I'm going to explain you what light metering is, how the different light metering modes work, and I'm going to give you some hints on when to use which light metering mode. So what is light metering? The metering is how your camera reads the brightness of a subject or a scene. All digital cameras have automatic exposure systems called light meter modes, and they will produce properly exposed images in most situations. However, there are times where they will not. And the reason for that is that these light meter modes are designed to measure the reflected light of a subject and compare it to uniform mid-gray. It then averages out the exposure of a scene according to that. If you shoot in any of the auto exposure modes like program, aperture priority, shutter priority, or even manual with auto ISO. Even in full manual mode, the light meter modes will affect how your camera guides you to what it thinks is the correct exposure, indicated on the exposure scale. The photographer then typically adjusts the aperture, the shutter speed, and/or the ISO to get the light meter in the center of the exposure scale. Now the problem with that is that the animals and the surroundings don't really consist of a pure mid-gray, which means that you might end up with incorrectly exposed images. And therefore, it is often necessary to change the camera's default settings to get correct exposed images. So let's have a look at the main light metering modes available on most modern cameras. Evaluative, multi-segment or matrix metering is your camera's default automatic exposure mode, where the scene is divided into a number of zones and the light is being evaluated in each zone individually and then averaged out for the scene as a whole. This is a very intelligent light meter mode, and depending on your camera model, it might even give a higher priority to the zone in which your active focus point is located. This meter mode is great for evenly lit up scenes, but it might produce incorrect exposures if you have a significant contrast between bright and dark. The second light meter mode is center-weighted average. It is very similar to evaluative metering in the sense that it reads most of the image area, but here more importance is given towards the center of the image with reduced sensitivity towards the corners. Of course, this can be a great option if your subject is situated in the center of the frame and if it is quite large in the frame as well. If it is really small, then your camera will still pick up quite a bit of the surrounding area, and again, your picture might not be 100% correctly exposed. That is when the third light meter mode comes in, which is called partial metering. Here, only 6 to about 14%, depends on your camera, of the center of the image is being evaluated for the light. Now, of course, this could be an advantage when shooting wildlife, as now the light is only being measured on the subject itself. However, only if your subject is in the middle of the frame. And considering the rules of composition, most wildlife photographers don't tend to frame their subjects right in the middle, and then this light meter mode might not be the right choice. Spot metering bases its exposure value on an even smaller area within the frame for precise metering on a very specific area or subject within the entire scene. Depending on your camera's manufacturer, about 1.5 to 4% of the image area is only being measured for light. Usually the image center again, but some camera manufacturers give you the option to attach the spot meter to your active focus point. Please read your manual to find this out. In wildlife, spot metering can be very effective if you shoot, for example, birds up against a very bright sky, backlit subjects, or very tiny subjects in a scene with a lot of contrast, lots of bright and dark areas, and you want to specifically only expose for this really tiny subject. However, as the light reading is going to vary a lot depending on where you point your spot meter, I would suggest that you use spot metering with great care, because if you don't have the time to really make sure that you place your spot meter in the right area, you may end up with a completely under or overexposed image. So you see, none of your camera's light metering modes is perfect for any given situation, which is why your camera's manufacturer gives you another very powerful tool called exposure compensation. So if your camera's light meter doesn't produce a result that you're happy with, you can now, if you shoot in any of the auto exposure modes, force your camera to over or underexpose an image by increments of 1/3 of a stop of light. Just remember to reset it back to 0 once you've finished using it. I personally tend to stick with one light meter mode only, and that is evaluative metering. I do dial in exposure compensation whenever needed, and I feel this way I really have an opportunity to get to know this light metering mode perfectly, to be able to anticipate much easier what kind of exposure compensation I need in what kind of lighting scenarios. I hope this tutorial was helpful. Let me know in the comments down below what is your favorite light metering mode and why. And if you did like this video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Thank you very much for watching and see you next time. Bye bye!